Hi, hey guys, this is Unit 3.1, Ecosystem Stability and Change, and we are on our last part of notes for it. So part 4 looks at disturbances in ecosystems. See, not a whole lot. This should be a pretty quick one, so let's go ahead and get going, shall we? All righty. So first, let's define what is a disturbance. A disturbance is classified as damage or destruction to ecosystems. So any type of force that can come along and either damage or completely destroy the ecosystem so there's nothing left. That's all we mean by disturbance. Now there are two classifications, natural and human caused. So natural include things that, as the name says, occur via nature. Volcanoes erupting, fire caused by lightning strikes, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, etc. As opposed to human-caused disturbances. So ones where humans are responsible for the damage or destruction, like if we clear cut a forest for either materials like lumber or to make way for settlements and farms, agriculture, pollution, mining, etc. All of those are going to disturb or completely destroy an ecosystem. Now, the stability looks at how the ecosystems are affected by disturbances. So disturbance will alter an ecosystem in some way. However, if it is considered stable, a stable ecosystem, then over time it can recover at a faster rate. So it can actually fix the changes, it can reverse the changes, or it can adapt to the changes at a faster rate if it's a stable ecosystem. If it's not a stable ecosystem, then it could take longer, if at all. Now, what we mean by recover, let's say here, looking at the picture in box 1, we have a forest, happy little forest. There's a fire. Fire destroys all the plants. We have nothing, but then grass starts to grow, and little shrubs and little trees, and then bigger trees, and more grass, and now we're back to the forest we had originally. So over time, it recovered and regrew because it was a stable ecosystem. Now, there are two factors that determine the stability of an ecosystem: resilience and resistance. And let's take a look at both of those. So resilience is the ability of an ecosystem to recover after the disturbance. So what we mean by that is after the disturbance has come and it's damaged the ecosystem, how can it recover? Can it recover at a faster rate? Can it fix itself? That's what we mean by resilience. Essentially, it's the ability for it to fix itself and return to the way it was. Now, as we see in the picture, we have a more resilient ecosystem versus a less resilient. Now, the reason why it's considered more versus less, a lot of it has to do with the biodiversity. The increased types of plants help to absorb excess nutrients like carbons and nitrogen and phosphorus within the ecosystem. The plants along the riverbed are also going to help prevent erosion of the riverbed or the lake bed, so it's going to help protect it. And the trees and those plants are also going to help uptake excess water to prevent flooding. Now, here we don't see that. We don't see a whole lot of plants that can help. The trees can't help take up the excess flooding. The plants are on the edge, but there's also this harder shoreline, which is actually going to affect how some flooding is not a bad thing because it can bring nutrients up onto the soil. Well, it can't with this hardened shoreline. So we're going to see more effects due to that. Notice there's less organisms, so it's just overall a less healthy lake. So if there's any kind of damage to this ecosystem, it may not be able to recover. as opposed to this one, which will be able to recover. So that's why this is more resilient versus that one. All right, resistance is the ability of the ecosystem to resist change from a disturbance. So whereas resilience is looking after the disturbance has come, after the damage has been done, can the ecosystem fix itself? This is looking at, can it not get damaged in the first place? So ecosystems with high resistance will show very little impact from different disturbances unless it is a more intense disturbance than usual. And here we have certain trees which live in areas that are prone to wildfires. They actually have certain adaptations that make them more resistant to the fire. So they naturally retain more moisture in the middle of the tree to prevent the tree from burning down. And it has a thicker bark so that the bark might be damaged, but the tree itself stays healthy. So unless it is a worse fire than usual, more intense blaze than usual, these trees are all going to be fine. They might look damaged, but they're still going to be perfectly healthy and continue to go on with their regular tree lives. Certain plants like this one, very good at storing water. So if a drought occurs in that area, it's not going to be a problem for that plant. It's adapted for that. So a drought will have very little impact on that plant. All right. And now ecological successions. So ecological succession is looking at how we can figure out the path an ecosystem will take due to a disturbance. So a disturbance occurs, ecosystems are going to change. They are constantly in flux and constantly changing due to both natural and human disturbances. Now what can happen is the older inhabitants, the older species could die out, new species can move in, and this can even cause further change because when you have species leaving, that means that niches are open, but then you have new species coming in, and maybe they don't fully fit into that niche, so now everything goes into chaos until balance can be restored. But when a disturbance occurs, we can actually look at a series of predictable changes that are expected to occur in a community over time. And that's all that ecological succession is. A good short summary of it would be this picture down here. There's a disturbance. After the disturbance, grass grows, then the shrubs grow, then the small trees grow. Then we have our climax forest, so that is, the full ecosystem, all good. And then maybe a disturbance occurs again, and if the disturbance does occur again, we can expect grasses, then shrubs, and small trees back to the climax forest. Now there actually are two kinds of ecological succession. There's primary and secondary, and let's take a look at those. So primary, the word primary actually means first. So primary succession is succession that occurs on surfaces where there is no soil. So in other words, there is no previous ecosystem. An ecosystem needs a producer. If we're just talking about bare rock and no soil, there's not going to be any kind of producer in that ecosystem. So with primary succession, we are building an ecosystem from scratch. And this occurs because of something called pioneer species. These are the first species to inhabit or populate an area. We look at this picture down here, we have plain rock, and here, these green things growing on the rocks. Those are lichen. Lichen are a great pioneer species. They don't need soil to grow on. They can actually just attach to the rock and grow from there. Now, over many, many, many generations, the lichen are going to grow, reproduce, and then die. And after they die, they decompose. So after many generations of grow, reproduce, die, decompose, grow, reproduce, die, decompose, eventually the decomposed components will start to form a thin layer of soil where seeds blown in from wind can start to grow, like for little flowers or grasses. Those are going to go through the same cycle. Grow, reproduce, die, decompose. Grow, reproduce, die, decompose. over and over until the soil gets thicker or deeper, in which case now other plants like bushes can take root. Many generations of them grow, reproduce, die, decompose. Grow, reproduce, die, decompose. Will lead to deeper soil where small trees can start growing. And then again, generations, we get more soil where now we have large trees growing. This is just an example of it, showing bare rock. We got some lichens on it. Once the lichens, they start to form soil. So now we have some small annual plants, which over time, as they say, this is hundreds of years, you can get grasses and perennials, then grasses, shrubs, shade intolerant trees, and then shade tolerant trees, which are going to be your bigger ones. So what we notice is that the soil keeps getting deeper because what we have are hundreds of years, thousands of generations of lichens and plants that are decomposing down into their constituent parts and forming the basis of that soil. We begin with our pioneer species, switch to the intermediate species, and once we have an established ecosystem, we now call that the climax community. Just another example, volcano erupts, the lava comes down, it covers everything, and when it cools down, it forms hard rock. The lava dries, turns into bare rock. There might have been an ecosystem there at one point, but the lava destroyed everything, and now you're just left with bare rock. Here, we see moss and lichens starting to grow. These are our pioneer species. As they grow, reproduce, die, and decompose, they start to form soil that grasses and small plants can start growing in. Those grasses and plants are going to, go through many years of grow, reproduce, die, decompose, strengthening up and deepening the soil so that larger plants can start growing. This is going to also attract birds and animals and insects until eventually we have a forest again. Notice the timeline, over 150 plus years for this to become established. So this isn't a quick thing. This is going to take a long time to do. All right, and then secondary succession. So community interactions tend to restore the ecosystem to its original condition after a disturbance. So what this is looking at is there is an ecosystem, there's a disturbance that damaged it, didn't destroy it, but it damaged the ecosystem, and then the ecosystem goes through the process of trying to fix it. Like we saw here, we had a forest, there was a fire, it did a lot of damage, grasses started growing, then shrubs and small trees in the forest. We have a forest here, the fire burns a lot of it down, but notice we still have soil, and in that soil there are seeds. So things can start growing right away. We don't need to make the soil from scratch anymore. So the soil is there, the seeds from the trees and the grasses are there, so they're going to start growing once again until you have a forest again. Again, fire, a lot of dead trees, grasses grow. Eventually the dead trees will fall down, just they don't have any strength. So we have grasses growing, shrubs, perennials, some small trees. Small trees are getting bigger, and then we're back to our full forest again. All right. And that takes us to our last thing, which is our additional resources. So we have some science in pajamas, one looking at disturbances and stability, and the other one looking at ecological succession. So we'll explain primary versus secondary successions in this video. And then with the other videos, we have Bozeman science, ecosystem dynamics, functioning, and resilience. And then we have Amoeba Sisters, Ecological Succession, Nature's Great Gift. We have Bozeman Science on Ecological Succession. And then we have Talia Barker, Ecosystem Stability and Change. All right, guys. So that's all for this chapter. I hope it helps. If you have questions, catch me in our Google Classroom email or class. I'll post a link for this Prezi in the video description so you can have access to those additional resources. But in the meantime, you guys, stay awesome, stay curious, and stay safe and healthy. All right, guys. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.